My name is Claire Morgan, and for most of my life, I believed family was supposed to protect you. I learned the hard way that sometimes family is the first thing that breaks you. 3 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. At the time, I was 36 years old, divorced, and working as a registered nurse in Denver. My younger sister, Vanessa, lived in Scottsdale, Arizona. She had a beautiful house, a successful husband, and a social media page filled with smiling family photos. To everyone looking from the outside, Vanessa was the successful daughter. I was the disappointment. At least that's what my father liked to tell people. When Mom got sick, Vanessa flew in for 2 days. She cried dramatically beside Mom's hospital bed. She posted photos online with captions about cherishing every moment. Then she left. I stayed. I stayed when Mom started chemotherapy. I stayed when she couldn't walk to the bathroom. I stayed when she forgot where she was. I stayed when she screamed from pain at 3 in the morning. I reduced my work schedule and eventually quit altogether. My savings disappeared faster than I expected. Mom needed help every day. And I couldn't leave her alone. Vanessa called once a week. Sometimes less. Every phone call followed the same script. How's Mom? I would spend 15 minutes explaining medications, treatments, appointments, and symptoms. Then Vanessa would sigh dramatically. I wish I could help more. But she never did. Months turned into years. Mom's condition worsened. My social life disappeared. My career stalled. My savings account nearly reached zero. One afternoon, while I was helping Mom eat soup in the kitchen, she suddenly grabbed my hand. Her fingers were weak, cold, fragile. Claire. Yeah, Mom. Tears filled her eyes. You gave up your life for me. I forced a smile. No, I didn't. She squeezed my hand. Don't lie to make me feel better. I looked away. Because she was right. I had given up everything. And sometimes I secretly resented it. That thought made me feel guilty. But it was true. Mom smiled sadly. One day people will understand. I almost laughed. Because nobody understood. Not Dad. Not Vanessa. Not anyone. 6 months later, Mom died. The funeral was packed. People hugged Vanessa. People praised Vanessa. People talked about how devoted Vanessa had been. I stood quietly near the back. Exhausted. Broken. Invisible. Then something happened that hurt more than losing Mom. At the reception, I overheard Vanessa talking to relatives. She lowered her voice. But not enough. Claire didn't really have a life anyway. A few people laughed. My chest tightened. Vanessa continued. Honestly, caring for Mom gave her something to do. The room laughed again. I felt physically sick. 3 years. 3 years of sacrifice. Reduced to a joke. I left before anyone saw me cry. A week later, Dad invited us to the lawyer's office. Mom's estate wasn't enormous. About $1.8 million. Mostly from investments in the family home. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I just wanted closure. The lawyer began reading documents. Then my stomach dropped. Mom had left almost everything to Dad. After Dad's death, the remaining assets would go entirely to Vanessa. I received $10,000. $10,000. After sacrificing 3 years of my life. The room felt blurry. Vanessa looked satisfied. Dad looked pleased. Nobody said a word. I quietly signed the paperwork and left. That night, I cried harder than I had at Mom's funeral. Not because of the money. Because it felt like proof that none of my sacrifices mattered. And that was the moment I decided to walk away from my family forever. I changed my number. Moved to another city. Started rebuilding my life. I never expected to hear from any of them again. But 3 years later, a single phone call changed everything. For a moment, I almost didn't answer the phone. The number was unfamiliar. I was finishing a 12-hour shift at a hospital in Colorado Springs. My feet hurt. My back hurt. And I wanted nothing more than to go home. But something told me to answer. Hello. There was silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Claire. My stomach tightened instantly. Vanessa. I nearly hung up. What do you want? Her voice sounded different. Smaller. Scared. Please don't hang up. I walked toward the empty hospital parking garage. Why are you calling me? Another pause. Then she said something I never expected. Dad is being investigated. I stopped walking. What? Vanessa took a shaky breath. The IRS. For several seconds I didn't speak. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt unbelievable. The same father who always acted superior. The same father who treated Vanessa like royalty. The same father who made me feel worthless. Now he was under investigation. What does that have to do with me? Vanessa sounded desperate. Everything. I leaned against my car. What are you talking about? Her voice cracked. The lawyer found something. The words instantly grabbed my attention. What lawyer? The estate lawyer. Now I was listening. Vanessa continued. After Dad refinanced the house, some documents were reviewed. My heartbeat accelerated. And silence. Then she whispered. There was another letter. I frowned. What letter? A letter Mom left. My chest tightened. The parking garage suddenly felt colder. What are you saying? Vanessa started crying. Actual crying. Not her usual dramatic performance. Real crying. The lawyer found it hidden inside another file. I couldn't speak. Mom's letter. For 3 years I had believed everything was settled. Finished. Gone. Now suddenly there was a letter? What's in it? Vanessa inhaled shakily. You need to come home. No. Claire. No. 3 years of pain came rushing back. 3 years of loneliness. 3 years of rebuilding my life. You all made your choice. Please. I heard genuine fear in her voice. Something was very wrong. Still I refused. Then she said the one thing that changed my mind. It explains why Mom changed her will. I froze. Changed her will. Not wrote. Changed. That single word echoed inside my head. Because my mother had promised me something months before she died. A conversation I had almost forgotten. One night after chemotherapy, she sat beside me in the living room. The house was quiet. The television was off. She looked exhausted, but determined. Claire. Yeah. If anything happens. I interrupted her. Don't. She smiled sadly. Listen. So I listened. I'll make things right. I remembered laughing softly. Mom, you don't owe me anything. She looked directly into my eyes. Yes, I do. At the time I assumed she meant emotionally. Not financially. Not legally. Now, standing in a parking garage 3 years later, that memory suddenly felt important. Very important. I agreed to fly back. 2 days later, I walked into the same lawyer's office where my life had fallen apart. Vanessa was already there. She looked terrible. Dark circles. Messy hair. No designer clothes. No confident smile. Dad sat beside her. And for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. The lawyer greeted me. Then placed a sealed envelope on the table. My hands trembled. Mom's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. The lawyer spoke carefully. This letter was discovered inside a safety deposit box that nobody knew existed. Dad shifted uncomfortably. The lawyer continued. Your mother instructed that this letter be opened only if concerns arose regarding her estate. My pulse pounded. The lawyer handed me the envelope. I opened it slowly. Vanessa inhaled shakily. You need to come home. No. Claire. No. 3 years of pain came rushing back. 3 years of loneliness. 3 years of rebuilding my life. You all made your choice. Please. I heard genuine fear in her voice. Something was very wrong. Still I refused. Then she said the one thing that changed my mind. It explains why Mom changed her will. I froze. Changed her will. Not wrote. Changed. That single word echoed inside my head. Because my mother had promised me something months before she died. A conversation I had almost forgotten. One night after chemotherapy, she sat beside me in the living room. The house was quiet. The television was off. She looked exhausted, but determined. Claire. Yeah. If anything happens. I interrupted her. Don't. She smiled sadly. Listen. So I listened. I'll make things right. I remembered laughing softly. Mom, you don't owe me anything. She looked directly into my eyes. Yes, I do. At the time I assumed she meant emotionally. Not financially. Not legally. Now, standing in a parking garage 3 years later, that memory suddenly felt important. Very important. I agreed to fly back. 2 days later, I walked into the same lawyer's office where my life had fallen apart. Vanessa was already there. She looked Terry and began reading. The first sentence made my eyes fill with tears. My dearest Claire. It felt like hearing Mom's voice again. The room disappeared. The years disappeared. For a moment it was just me and her. The letter continued. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. My breathing slowed. I kept reading. I know your father better than anyone. I glanced at Dad. His face had turned pale. Very pale. Then I reached the paragraph that changed everything. The original version of my will left equal shares to both daughters. The room went silent. Vanessa looked stunned. I looked stunned. Dad looked sick. The letter continued. Several months before my death, your father pressured me while I was heavily medicated. My hand started shaking. No way. I kept reading. He repeatedly insisted Vanessa deserved more because she had children. The lawyer quietly watched. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then came the final blow. Eventually I signed revised documents because I was too weak to fight anymore. I looked up, straight at Dad. His eyes dropped to the floor. And in that moment, I knew it was true. Everything. Every word. For 3 years I believed my mother chose Vanessa over me. For 3 years I blamed myself. For 3 years I wondered why I wasn't enough. Now I finally understood. She never chose Vanessa. Someone chose for her. And suddenly, Dad looked terrified. Because the letter wasn't the only thing hidden inside that safety deposit box. There was evidence. And what the lawyer revealed next would destroy the entire family. Nobody spoke. The lawyer opened a second folder. Dad stared at it as if he already knew what was inside. Maybe he did. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Morgan didn't only leave a letter. My heartbeat accelerated. There were financial records. Dad's jaw tightened. Vanessa looked confused. What kind of records? She asked. The lawyer slid several documents across the table. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Property records. Investment withdrawals. Pages and pages of paperwork. Then he pointed to one highlighted section. This account belongs solely to your mother. I leaned forward. The number nearly made me choke. $2.4 million. I looked up. Mom had another account? The lawyer nodded. One your father never disclosed during probate. The room instantly became silent. I slowly turned toward Dad. His face had lost all color. Vanessa looked equally shocked. What are you saying? She asked. The lawyer answered carefully. I'm saying this account should have been included in the estate. My stomach dropped. The lawyer continued. Instead, the funds were transferred several months before Mrs. Morgan's death. Dad stood up. This is ridiculous. The lawyer didn't flinch. The transfers were authorized while Mrs. Morgan was undergoing heavy chemotherapy. Nobody moved. Dad grabbed his jacket. I don't need to sit here and listen to this nonsense. Then the lawyer delivered the sentence that changed everything. The IRS disagrees. Dad froze. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. The lawyer continued. Several transfers triggered an audit. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Dad. He didn't answer. Dad, what did you do? Nothing. His silence said more than words ever could. The lawyer opened another document. Your mother kept detailed notes. My chest tightened. Mom. Even at the end. She knew. She had known. The lawyer handed me a small notebook. I recognized it immediately. Mom's handwriting covered every page. I opened it. The first entry was dated 7 months before her death. Robert says Vanessa deserves everything because she gave him grandchildren. I swallowed hard. Another page. Claire is sacrificing her future for me. I don't know how to repay her. Tears blurred my vision. Another page. Robert keeps bringing new paperwork. Another. Today I refused to sign. Another. Today I finally gave in because I was exhausted. The room disappeared around me. I could barely breathe. Mom hadn't forgotten me. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been trapped. For 3 years I carried pain that never belonged to her. Dad suddenly stood. "I'm leaving." The lawyer calmly replied, "I wouldn't recommend that." Dad stopped. "Why?" The lawyer slid one final document across the table. "A lawsuit, filed that morning, against Robert Morgan, my father, the estate, and several financial accounts." Dad looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Vanessa whispered, "Oh my God." For the first time in her life, she looked completely lost. The lawyer spoke quietly. "If the court determines financial misconduct occurred, significant portions of the estate may be redistributed." Nobody said a word. Then Vanessa shocked me. She turned toward me and started crying. Not fake tears. Real ones. "Claire." I stared at her. She wiped her eyes. I didn't know. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to walk away. But something in her face stopped me. Because for the first time, she wasn't acting superior. She wasn't performing. She looked devastated. "I thought Mom chose me." I laughed bitterly. "So did I." Vanessa covered her mouth. "I swear I didn't know." The anger I'd carried for years suddenly felt complicated. Because maybe Vanessa wasn't the villain I thought she was. Maybe she was just another person Dad manipulated. The same way he manipulated Mom. The same way he manipulated me. The same way he'd manipulated everyone. 3 months later, the investigation expanded. The evidence was overwhelming. Hidden accounts. Improper transfers. Undisclosed assets. Documents signed under questionable circumstances. The story became impossible to ignore. Dad's reputation collapsed. Former friends disappeared. Business partners vanished. People stopped answering his calls. The man who spent years controlling everyone suddenly had no control left. And for the first time, nobody came to save him. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Vanessa started calling me. Not because she needed money. Not because she needed help. Because she wanted a sister. First, I kept my distance. Years of pain don't disappear overnight. But slowly, we talked. Then we met for coffee. Then dinner. Then holidays. The truth had broken our family. But strangely, it also gave us a chance to rebuild it. Without lies. Without favoritism. Without Dad standing in the middle. A year later, the court reached its final decision. And when the judge announced the outcome, I finally received something worth far more than money. The court hearing wasn't scheduled for another 4 months. That should have made things easier. It didn't. If anything, it made everything worse. Because now everyone knew something was wrong. The investigation had become the biggest topic in town. People whispered about my father at restaurants, at church, at the grocery store, everywhere. For decades, Robert Morgan had been respected. Now people crossed the street to avoid him. And for the first time in his life, he couldn't charm his way out of it. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept calling. At first I ignored her messages. Years of resentment don't disappear because someone says they're sorry. But eventually I answered. Mostly because I was tired of carrying anger. We met at a small cafe halfway between our cities. When I walked inside, I barely recognized her. The confident woman who used to dominate every room was gone. She looked exhausted. Older. Sad. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa quietly said, "I owe you an apology." I stared at my coffee. She continued, "Actually, I owe you hundreds of them." I wanted to be angry. Part of me still was. But another part saw something I'd never seen before. Humility. Real humility. Not performance. Not manipulation. The real thing. Vanessa looked down. "Mom used to tell me you were stronger than me." I blinked. "What?" She laughed sadly. I hated hearing it. The statement surprised me. My mother never said those things around me. Apparently she said them around Vanessa. "Why would you hate that?" Vanessa smiled bitterly. "Because everybody compared me to you." I nearly laughed. That made absolutely no sense. She was the favorite. The successful one. The golden child. Vanessa shook her head. "You don't understand." Maybe I didn't. Then she told me something that completely changed my understanding of our childhood. Growing up, Dad constantly praised Vanessa. But every compliment came with pressure. Pressure to be perfect. Pressure to win. Pressure to impress people. Pressure to never fail. Meanwhile, Mom admired something else. Independence. Kindness. Resilience. Qualities she often saw in me. For years, Vanessa secretly believed Mom loved me more, while I spent years believing Mom loved Vanessa more. The realization felt absurd. Two sisters, both convinced they were less loved, while neither of us understood the truth. The real problem wasn't Mom. The real problem was Dad. For years he created competition between us, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, but the result was always the same: distance, jealousy, misunderstanding. Vanessa wiped away tears. I spent 20 years trying to earn his approval. I nodded slowly. So did I. For the first time in our lives, we actually understood each other. And strangely, that hurt more than the anger ever did. A week later, the lawyer called me. His voice sounded serious. "Claire, I found something else." My stomach tightened. Something else? How many secrets had Mom left behind? The next day I drove to his office. He handed me a small sealed envelope. Unlike the others, this one wasn't addressed to anyone. No name. No instructions. Nothing. Inside was a key. A small silver key. Attached was a note. In Mom's handwriting. Storage Unit 214. I frowned. "What's that?" The lawyer shrugged. "We checked the records." He paused. "The storage unit was rented by your mother for nearly 12 years. 12 years. I stared at him. Nobody knew? No. The next morning, Vanessa and I drove there together. The facility sat on the edge of town. Old. Quiet. Forgettable. The kind of place nobody would ever think to look. The manager led us down a long hallway, then stopped. Unit 214. My heart pounded. Vanessa looked nervous. Neither of us knew what to expect. Old furniture? Family photos? Boxes? I inserted the key. The lock clicked. The metal door slowly rolled upward. And both of us froze. Because the unit wasn't full of junk. It wasn't full of furniture. It wasn't full of memories. It was full of files. Hundreds of them. Carefully organized. Labeled. Cataloged. Documented. And at the very center sat a large cardboard box, with 6 words written across the top. "For my daughters together." Neither of us moved, because somehow, we both knew our mother had been planning for this day, and whatever was inside that box, it was going to change everything again. For several seconds, neither Vanessa nor I moved. The storage unit felt strangely quiet, almost sacred, like we had stepped into a place our mother never intended anyone else to see. Vanessa slowly approached the box. Her hands were shaking. Mine were too. The cardboard looked old. Years old. The tape had yellowed with age. Mom had prepared this long before she died. Maybe years before. I carefully opened the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes. Photographs. Journals. Home videos. School records. Birthday cards. Medical records. Letters. Hundreds of memories. Vanessa picked up a photograph. Then another. And another. Her eyes widened. "Claire." I looked over. The photos showed something neither of us expected. Mom had documented nearly everything. Every dance recital. Every school project. Every soccer game. Every birthday. Every family vacation. Every achievement. And one thing became obvious very quickly. Mom didn't favor either. Not once. She celebrated us equally. Loved us equally. Protected us equally. For years Vanessa and I had built entire stories in our heads. Stories about favorites. Stories about rejection. Stories about being less loved. The photographs destroyed those stories within minutes. Then Vanessa found a journal. Inside was an entry dated 18 years earlier. She started reading aloud. Today Robert told Vanessa she must always be the best. An hour later he told Claire she should let Vanessa have the spotlight. I worry he doesn't realize how much damage he's causing. Vanessa stopped reading. Neither of us spoke. Because suddenly our childhood made sense. Every rivalry. every misunderstanding, every insecurity. Dad hadn't created one favorite child. He had created two insecure daughters. And we'd spent decades fighting each other instead of seeing the real problem. Hours passed. The deeper we dug into the storage unit, the more emotional things became. Then I discovered something hidden beneath a stack of folders. A sealed video cassette. Attached was a note. Watch together. Vanessa stared at it. I don't think I'm ready. Neither was I. But we watched anyway. The facility manager helped us transfer the video to a digital format. Then we sat together in a small viewing room. The screen flickered. Static appeared. Then Mom appeared. Healthy. Smiling. Years younger. The sight hit me like a truck. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Mom looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this. She smiled softly. Then I'm gone. Vanessa immediately started crying. Mom continued. I know both of you probably think I loved the other one more. Vanessa looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us could believe what we were hearing. Mom knew. She had known the entire time. She knew exactly how we felt. Then her expression became serious. The greatest regret of my life is not stopping that belief sooner. Tears rolled down my face. Mom continued. Claire, you always believed you weren't enough. I froze. Vanessa, you always believed your worth depended on achievement. Vanessa covered her mouth. How could Mom understand us so perfectly? Because she was our mother. She saw everything, even when we thought she didn't. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The inheritance was never my greatest concern. Vanessa wiped away tears. Mom smiled gently. My greatest concern was whether my daughters would find their way back to each other after I was gone. The room became silent. Because suddenly none of the money mattered. None of it. The lawsuit. The estate. The investigation. The inheritance. All of it felt smaller. Mom hadn't spent 12 years preserving documents because of money. She spent 12 years preserving the truth. For us. Then the video reached its final minutes. And Mom revealed one last secret. A secret neither Vanessa nor I expected. A secret involving the family property itself. And when she finished speaking, both of us sat completely speechless. Because everything we thought we knew about our family's future was about to change. The video ended. But neither Vanessa nor I moved. We simply sat there staring at the blank screen, trying to process what Mom had just told us. Because the final secret wasn't about money. It wasn't about the will. And it wasn't about Dad. It was about the land. The family property everyone had been fighting over for years. The same property Dad worshipped. The same property Jake would have sold if the price was high enough. The same property Mom spent decades protecting. According to Mom, nearly 40 acres on the western edge of the property had once belonged to her family. Not Dad's family. Hers. Years earlier, before Vanessa and I were born, Mom's parents had transferred the land into a protected trust. A trust designed to keep developers away. A trust intended to preserve the area permanently. The problem? Dad never agreed with it. For years he tried convincing Mom to dissolve the trust. Sell the land. Cash out. Move on. Mom always refused. Then she looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Robert probably hasn't stopped trying. Vanessa looked sick. 'Cause Mom was right. Dad had been talking about selling sections of the property for years. Then Mom revealed something shocking. The trust didn't disappear when she died. It transferred. To both daughters. Equally. Vanessa and I exchanged stunned looks. The land belonged to us. Not Dad. Not the estate. Not anyone else. And suddenly the timing of everything made sense. The investigation. The hidden documents. The panic. The pressure. Dad wasn't just worried about money. He was worried about losing control. For decades he'd controlled every major decision in the family. Now for the first time in his life, he couldn't. 3 weeks later the court hearings began. The local courthouse was packed. Far more people attended than expected. By then everyone knew the story. A respected businessman. A hidden estate. Missing assets. Secret accounts. A dying woman's final letter. It sounded like something from a movie. But it wasn't. It was our life. Dad sat with his attorneys. Vanessa sat beside me. Neither of us spoke much. 4 years we sat on opposite sides of every family disagreement. Now we sat together. The judge spent days reviewing documents, financial records, transfer records, medical records, estate documents, witness testimony. The evidence was overwhelming. Several transactions occurred while Mom was undergoing treatment. Others had never been disclosed properly. Some paperwork contained serious inconsistencies. Every day Dad looked smaller, older, more tired. For the first time in my life, nobody was protecting him from consequences. Then came the most emotional moment of the trial. Mom's video was entered into evidence. The courtroom became silent. Everyone watched. Family members, friends, neighbors, former business partners. And when Mom appeared on screen, the room froze. Even the judge seemed emotional. Mom wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply telling the truth. And sometimes truth is more powerful than anger. After the video ended, nobody spoke for nearly a minute. Then something happened I never expected. Dad started crying. Not quietly, not dramatically, genuinely. The strongest man I had ever known suddenly looked broken. For a moment I felt angry, then sad, then strangely numb. Because despite everything, he was still my father. The judge announced that a final decision would be issued within 30 days. 30 days. 30 days before everything changed forever. That night, Vanessa and I sat on Mom's old porch together. The same porch where she used to drink coffee every morning. The sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. Vanessa looked toward the horizon. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" I smiled sadly. "For finally stopping the fighting?" She nodded. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had lost my family. Maybe I was finally finding it again. But neither of us knew that the judge's final ruling would do something nobody expected. Something that would completely reshape the future of the Morgan family. The judge's ruling arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. I remember because I almost didn't attend. After months of hearings, investigations, documents, and endless legal arguments, I felt exhausted. Emotionally exhausted. Financially exhausted. Mentally exhausted. I wasn't hoping for a victory anymore. I was hoping for peace. The courtroom was quieter than usual. No reporters. No crowds. Just family, lawyers, and the judge. Vanessa sat beside me. For once, neither of us seemed nervous. Whatever happened, we would face it together. Something I never imagined saying a year earlier. The judge began reading. The decision was long. Very long. But one conclusion became clear almost immediately. The court found substantial evidence that my father's actions had improperly influenced portions of Mom's estate planning. Several financial transfers were ruled invalid. Certain assets would be restored to the estate. Additional funds would be redistributed according to the court's findings. Dad stared at the floor. He never looked up. Then came the part nobody expected. Not even the attorneys. The judge referenced the trust connected to the protected family land. Mom's trust. The one she spent years protecting. The judge confirmed what Mom intended all along. Ownership would remain equally divided between Vanessa and me. Neither could sell it without the other's approval. Neither could force the other out. Neither could control it alone. First it sounded inconvenient. Then I realized what Mom had done. She wasn't protecting the land. She was protecting us. She knew the only way to keep the family together was to make cooperation unavoidable. Even years after her death, she was still trying to heal the damage. The hearing ended. People slowly stood. Conversations started. Chairs moved. Papers shuffled. Dad remained seated. Alone. For the first time in my life, nobody rushed to stand beside him. I watched him carefully. The anger I carried for years should have felt satisfying. It didn't. Because revenge wasn't standing in front of me. Consequences were. And they looked very different. Eventually Dad approached us. Slowly. Almost cautiously. His hair looked grayer. His shoulders looked heavier. His confidence had disappeared. He stopped in front of Vanessa and me. Then he said something neither of us expected. I was wrong. 3 simple words. Words I had waited my entire life to hear. Nobody spoke. Dad swallowed hard. I spent years believing I knew what was best for everyone. His voice cracked. And I hurt both of you. Vanessa started crying immediately. I felt tears forming too. Not because everything was fixed. Not because everything was forgiven. Because acknowledgement matters. Sometimes more than money. More than lawsuits. More than winning. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Dad handed me something. A small envelope. I found this while cleaning your mother's desk. My heart immediately recognized the handwriting. Mom. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded page. The letter wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. But it became the most important thing I inherited. Claire. If you're reading this, then life probably became more complicated than either of us wanted. I smiled through tears. That sounded exactly like Mom. You spent so many years taking care of other people that I'm afraid you forgot something important. My hands trembled. You deserve a life too. The words hit harder than any court ruling ever could. Because she was right. For years I had defined myself by sacrifice. By responsibility. By survival. I had forgotten how to simply live. The letter continued. Don't spend your future proving your worth to people who should have recognized it already. I stopped reading, closed my eyes, and finally let myself cry. Not for what I lost, for what I finally understood. My value was never determined by inheritance, or approval, or recognition. It existed long before any of those things. A year later, Vanessa and I transformed part of the protected land into a community agricultural education center. Something Mom would have loved. Local students visit it every year. Families gathered there. Scholarships were created. Opportunities were opened. The property no longer represented conflict. It represented healing. As for Dad, our relationship improved slowly. Very slowly. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day, or a month, or even a year. But people can change if they're willing to face the truth. And eventually, he did. Looking back now, the biggest surprise wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't the hidden accounts. It wasn't the lawsuit. It was discovering that the person I thought had abandoned me never stopped fighting for me at all. Mom's final gift wasn't money. It wasn't land. It wasn't justice. It was the truth. And sometimes the truth is the most valuable inheritance anyone can leave behind.